It's interesting to think about your entrepreneurial self. That's the big question that we've got sitting in front of us. And it really comes back to how each of us individually defines an entrepreneurial self, right? In my case, I would think of an entrepreneurial self as somebody who challenges the system, who does things differently, and brings some passion and energy into that space. That'd be my sort of general take on it. But everybody's entitled to think about that idea of an entrepreneurial self and who it is for them and what that means. But in my case, somebody who's taking on a system, trying to do things a new way, trying to create value for other people, right? And that would be my students, yeah? Trying to create some value in their lives. So, when I think about, what have I learnt when I use these supporting questions to actually help me to understand the nature of myself as my entrepreneurial self. It's interesting. I just got the snapshot week 3 evaluation of the teaching in the unit, and it's quite similar in some respects. Only a few students. It'd be lovely if everybody did it. Of course, then you'd really know what you're playing with. But but for the students who've done it, we're back to really where we were at the start of last semester. We've got a bunch of students over here who says, wow, this is really interesting, it's different, sort of about me, I'm really enjoying it. And then there's these other students who sort of say, how dare you drag me in here on a Saturday? I don't want to know anything about you. Why do you need to tell us about you personally? And so what I've learned from that perspective is I don't like being disconnected. I don't really like this notion of not feeling like I'm useful in my students' lives. So I know there are some students over here who are saying, hey, this looks like it's going to be good. But there's still these other students, an unknown number of students who are saying, this is just not something that's really working for me. And so, it's very easy in this sort of context for us to fall into this sort of culture of fear, right? Students have a fear of failing the unit. Students have a fear of, having to work in a group. Students have a fear of, easy to have fears. And it's easy for me to have fears, right? Oh, I'm going to get a really bad evaluation on this unit, right? Because even though there's people who like something, we've got people who don't like it, and it all evens out and just says, the unit was say so, right? So you can jump at those shadows, right, and allow that culture of fear to sort of pervade through, hey, what have I got to do to try and appease everybody? And we've done a lot in this semester. So I feel confident that we have tried to adjust things by having workshops on the Monday for people who can't make it on Saturday, for reducing from Saturday and Sunday down to Saturday, and other bits and pieces, the help sessions and all other sorts of things. So when I think about what I'm learning, the key thing I'm learning is that I still have this real uncomfortableness about being disconnected from some of the students. And that's not something that I am comfortable with at all. It's not something that sort of sits in my psyche. So if I move on to the second supporting question, which relates to my values, well, for as long as I can remember, I've always enjoyed helping people. That's my sort of primary disposition in life, is I like to enjoy. I don't like competition in any great sense. I like it on a sporting field, but the sporting field is just sport, so it's not really life in that sense that you have to step off the field at the end of the day, yeah, and go back to life, right? So I always like to enjoy people, and I like to help people because they've helped themselves, right? So my sort of belief system is that as a student, you shouldn't rely on anyone else other than yourself to be the teacher. That's the way I've sort of worked my way through life. I was a very bad student when I was young, and as a result, I found out that I can't rely on other people to be my teacher, right? I can find people to help me to but I have to teach myself. I have to take on life's lessons. I have to work my own way through things. And so unlike this idea of fear, this is something that I'm feeling quite uncomfortable with, right? This disconnectedness, which if we leave it there, it can just create this culture of fear. So I'm very anti that. I really do want to stick to my guns and my beliefs about wanting to help people. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of how this has challenged my beliefs, in what I can do to help, the circumstances are different. That's the really big thing, I think, that's happening here. And maybe I'll explain that as I get a little bit further down the track. But I've always taught students in elective subjects. Students say, oh, I've heard there's something in that unit that would be good for me, and they come and do it, right? And so I tend to sit in front of a bunch of students who want to be there. They've said, I want to go into that room. I've heard how that unit operates. I've heard they do a lot of group work. I've heard you have to do presentations. I've heard this and I've heard that, and I want to go and do it. But at QUT, in this first undergraduate unit that I've been involved in, it's a compulsory unit for so many students, yeah? And so students didn't sign up to come in and listen to my personal stories of my life and my failings and say that they wanted to do something on a Saturday and so on and so on. So I've got this challenge that's coming right back at me. You know, I'm wanting to walk this way and say, hey, I want to help you guys. And I've got people walking back that way and say, we don't want your help, right? So that's really tricky for me. And when I was in China recently, I came across the idea of the beginner's mind. I think it's originally from Japan, but it's certainly a prominent idea in Chinese culture as well. And I think that's something that I've got to try and adapt. I think the challenge I've got in terms of my values is rather than having this confidence that I can just help people, you know, there's something that I've learnt to do as an educator that can help people. I need to have a more open mind. And the beginner's mind basically looks at everything anew. It doesn't carry forward everything from the past and assume that was a predictor of the future. It just tries to make sense of what we have in front of us. And so I think that's the big challenge to my values at the moment, is not backing them to the hilt, but accepting that personally, I need to sort of look at things afresh. As I say, in terms of my life experiences in this regard, the challenge that I have is that I've been an educator and I've been working with educators, and by and large, entrepreneurship education tends to be very, very elective, not compulsory, right? And so we're able to sort of create something and able to work with other educators and other students in this sort of almost voluntary space. And so you get a bit of a sense for who's volunteering to go into that space, and you can get a nice fit. So I haven't had to deal with this issue in the past before. I haven't had this sense of disconnectedness. And I don't know whether it's only like 20 students out of 350 who are really annoyed with the way the unit is set up. And I don't know whether it's only 50 students who are really happy with the unit, because the results of the survey are generally so small. So, you know, there's a tag, guys. You know, it'd be great if everyone filled in the end of semester thing. I'd rather have everyone tell me they hated it, and then I know, okay, there's no guessing here, everyone hates it. Or we can actually look at it in a better sense, that it looks like there's this people who don't like it and these people who do like it. So my life experiences don't give me a lot to draw on in terms of being able to say, oh, I've been here before, I know what to do. Because I actually haven't been here before, right? I've had a very sort of almost preaching to the converted type of context to operate in. So that's a really other interesting one. And you know, when I think about other people's perspectives, as moving on to question 5, yeah, I can see both sides of this equation, and I can see people who are thinking this is a great opportunity, right? I can see the students who think, it's a great opportunity. And I can see other people thinking to themselves, I hate group work. I hate this additional work that's required for this unit. I hate having to do something in a different way. I'm nearly finished my degree. Why have I got to start the learning process and do it in a different way? So I can see this balance that exists between different people, right? One of the challenges that I've got is that I wholeheartedly believe in transformational learning. I believe that I can help students to understand something about themselves, and as a result help them to see their environment through new eyes. But that doesn't help me if somebody really doesn't want to be a part of the process and it's compulsory. I feel sorry for students who really hate what we're doing and it's compulsory. Yep, I've got a real sense, I'm not upset that you're feeling that way if you're in that situation. I'm actually just trying to work out what could be the solution without changing the way that the course can be beneficial for the people who actually see the opportunity and want to take it and run with it. So we can't offer two different courses, at the one time. There's no magic bullet to this, right? In terms of trying to get my head around this space and trying to find my bearings and think of my other sources of information that I've gone off to think about, there's a great guy, he's got this wonderful book called The Courage to Teach, Parker J. Palmer. I'm writing a book at the moment actually helping other entrepreneurship educators to think about how to teach. So it's always ironic when you're trying to give advice or give guidance to other people and you've got these problems in your own backyard. It's almost like, who are you? Who are you to help us, right? You can't even get your own class to be happy. So it's interesting, isn't it, that you have things. But I'll read you a passage from his book because it's the sort of thing that gives me the courage, as the book's called, The Courage to Teach. It gives me the courage to sort of try and find a positive way to move forward. He says, I am a teacher at heart, and there are moments in the classroom when I can hardly hold my joy. When my students and I discover uncharted territory to explore, when the pathway out of the thicket opens up before us, when our experience is illumined by the lightning life of the mind, then teaching is the finest work that I know. I think this is the fifth industry that I've worked in my life. And it's by far the most rewarding. I love teaching because even if there's only one student who just absolutely shines through and just says, this is really setting me up to help me to move forward, to think about my own lives, my own dreams in life, then the reward is unbelievable, almost immeasurable. So there's this positive note, right, about how teaching is the finest work that we can know. But then he goes on to say, but at other moments, the classroom is so lifeless or painful or confused, and I'm so powerless to do anything about it, that my claim to be a teacher seems to be a transparent sham. Then the enemy is everywhere, in those students from some alien planet, in that subject I thought I knew, and in the personal pathology that keeps me earning my living this way. What a fool I was to imagine that I had mastered this occult art. Harder to define than tea leaves, and impossible for mortals to do even passably well. Now obviously the book goes on to talk about a whole range of things, including this issue of fear, which I think is so central to this. How do we react? How does someone in my situation who sees themselves as being entrepreneurial, how does someone react to this level of disconnectedness that reduces the effectiveness of being entrepreneurial, right? Of being able to help students to create new value in their lives, right? So when I step back from all of this and I think about what does this mean for me as a learner, right? These reflections, the first 14 minutes here when I think about that, when I step right back from it, well, I remain confident. I have thousands, literally thousands of people who are past students who I communicate with very regularly on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I see the lives they're living, and I get such positive encouragement and feedback from their reflections on their own lives and their own learning and their own journeys that they're actually on, and the attribution that they provide to, I'm so happy that I had that experience that's given me this confidence to be able to go off and do these things. So I'm very, very positive, right? But I appreciate that I need to step back. Despite how confident I could be, I know I need to step back, and I need to embrace this notion of the beginner's mind. Because for me to learn effectively in the context of connected and disconnected students, I need to not take things for granted. I need to not assume that what's worked in the past will just simply work in the future. I recognize the challenge of this compulsory nature of this unit and how it doesn't suit everybody. But you know what? I can either give in to the fear and try and pander to those who are really, really unhappy, or I can be even further vulnerable to the class. And so that's what I'll most probably do. In workshop 2, I'll be even more vulnerable, because I do want you to understand who I am and what I'm trying to help you achieve. And I don't want to do that by stepping back further and thinking, gosh, there are people in this room that don't like me. There are people in this room who don't like what we're doing. There are people in this room who don't want to engage. I don't want to be frozen by that fear. I want to come forward to you, and I want to be even more vulnerable to you. There's a lovely author, Isabel Allende, and she once said that it's through spending ourselves that we become rich. And when I read that, I thought, wow, that captures who I am. I want to give. I don't need anything in return other than to see the value of what's been given in other people's lives. So, that's my reflections. Hopefully you can make sense. This issue of my entrepreneurial self and my desire to be different, to take on the system, and to create values for other people, you, right? That's what's the issue here in terms of me thinking about my entrepreneurial self. But in reflecting on it, I've been able to walk my way through thinking about what have I learnt that's new, right? This disconnectedness. I've been able to think about my values, about always wanting to help people. I've been thinking about that challenge to this existing values, right? I've been able to think about this in the context of my past life experiences, that I haven't really encountered this type of situation before. I am very appreciative of the different perspectives here, be they educators and or you guys, my students. Some of you are saying, this is pretty cool, and some of you are saying, I don't understand why we have to do this, especially on a Saturday. But I've been able to go back and think about the source of information that matter the most to me, Parker J. Palmer, and think about how he can give us the courage to teach. And when I step right back from all of this and I think about myself as a learner, I can see that I need to keep confident. I need to become even more vulnerable to you guys, not surrender to fear, and I need to stick and develop this notion of the beginner's mind, because that's going to help me to reset some of my assumptions and hopefully to move on and find a way to actually improve this situation for everyone. Cheerio.